it's time for me to once again use my favorite clickbait sounding phrase, left in Japan. That's right, today we're looking at another game that was never released in North America or Europe, and was, in fact, left in Japan. And I say clickbait sounding in regards to that term, not in the sense that it's a false or misleading statement, because it's not. The game being featured in today's showcase really never has seen release outside of Japan. I use that term because, as someone who enjoys all things weird and retro, especially when it comes to import gaming goodness, it's a phrase that, on YouTube, when I see it, typically implies the coverage of something odd and obscure. And odd and obscure is definitely the best way to describe this game here. This is Mega Man & Bass Challenger from the Future for the WonderSwan, sequel to the already somewhat obscure Mega Man & Bass for the Super Nintendo and later the Game Boy Advance. This is Stuff We Play, home of everything weird and retro, and today we're looking at the obscure Mega Man WonderSwan game. But first, I need to tell you about today's sponsor, Zen Plus. Zen Plus is part of Zen Market, an awesome Japanese import service, and specifically, I'm here to tell you about Marin Games. Marin Games is a shop focused on providing a massive selection of Japanese retro games at low prices. Titles are available for the PlayStation 2, Game Boy Advance, Famicom, and many other classic systems. There are hundreds of different games available here, and the majority of them cost less than $10 USD. Plus, I can vouch for the quality of their service from experience, with the title featured in my Evangelion Pachinko video coming from Marin Games. They're a fantastic shop and are well worth checking out, even if you have just a small interest in import gaming. In fact, I'd recommend that you check out Zen Market itself as well, as they allow you to buy items from places such as Japanese Amazon and bid on items from sites such as Yahoo Auctions Japan. Honestly, from my experiences, shipping is fast and items come in great condition, so if Zen Plus sounds awesome to you and if you'd like to even see a curated list of Mega Man items, then follow one of the two links in the description below or in the pinned comment below. And so, with that, let's get into the video proper. This is Mega Man & Bass Challenger from the Future, also known as, Rockman
& Forte 未来からの挑戦者.
That. However, for our sake, I will simply be referring to this game as Mega Man & Bass 2. But why is there a Japanese exclusive sequel to a Mega Man game that itself was originally Japanese exclusive? And is it any good? And also, what even is a WonderSwan? Well, to answer the latter question first, the WonderSwan is a handheld console released in Japan in 1999. It was designed by Game Boy inventor Gunpei Yokoi, who left Nintendo after the massive failure of another of his inventions, the Virtual Boy. Perhaps morbidly, the WonderSwan itself was released by Bandai shortly after Yokoi himself died in a car crash. The initial WonderSwan was a black and white unit, much like the original Game Boy that had released a decade prior. But 1 year after release, a color version was released, called the WonderSwan Color. There is also another variant of the WonderSwan released in 2002 called the Swan Crystal, which was essentially just a WonderSwan Color but with a better screen. The WonderSwan line's big gimmick was that these systems could be played either in a landscape or portrait mode, they ran off of a single AA battery, and, despite being released around the turn of the millennium, Bandai couldn't be bothered to put a frontlit or backlit screen on any of them. Still, it was popular enough to, at one point, gain 8% of the Japanese handheld gaming market, and if you want my full thoughts on it, then you should definitely check out the buying guide I did on it a few years back. But what about Mega Man & Bass itself? Not the WonderSwan game, but the original one. Why does this game exist? And despite being a Mega Man platformer released after Mega Man 8, why wasn't this called Mega Man 9? Well, to understand that, we need to go back to Mega Man 8. Mega Man 8 was released for the PlayStation 1 in 1996 and was intended to celebrate the Blue Bomber's 10th anniversary. It featured beautiful sprite work, CD quality audio, and even got an updated release on the Sega Saturn a month after its original release. However, this was also the first mainline classic Mega Man game not to see release on a Nintendo console. And perhaps that was for a good reason, seeing as there are few, if any, fully 2D platformers on the Nintendo 64. But then Mega Man game producer Keiji Inafune felt that this switch to Sony and Sega platforms would alienate some longtime fans who didn't own those platforms. Thus, in 1998, Mega Man and Bass was released. However, the SNES version of this game would never leave Japan. Like, seriously, what SNES games were there in North America in 1998? Frogger? But it would get a port to the Game Boy Advance in 2002, with that getting a localized North American release in 2003. Also, the reason that this game wasn't called Mega Man 9 was because, along with recycling some art assets from Mega Man 8, it also recycled some of the bosses from that game. That's also why, in development, Mega Man Bass was actually just called Mega Man 8.5. So, in Mega Man Bass, you play as either Mega Man or his rival, Bass, who was introduced in Mega Man 7. They follow similar stories and go through all the same stages, with their only differences being gameplay style. Mega Man can run, jump, charge his Mega Buster, and slide, while Bass can dash, double jump, and shoot in 7 directions, but that comes at the cost of not being able to run and shoot at the same time, or have his shots go through walls. Also, Bass's rapid fire shots are much weaker than Mega Man's Mega Buster. The game falls apart, however, because no attempt is made to properly balance it out for both characters. Stages seem to be, for the most part, created with Bass in mind, while bosses, for the most part, seem to be made with Mega Man in mind. As such, it's a case of pick your poison, as depending on what character you choose, you're in for a game with all the makings of a great title that's marred by either the boss or stages respectively being absolute slogs. These issues are made even worse in the Game Boy Advance port, as that has some absolutely horrendous screen crunch. But I've also made it clear in previous videos that I think Mega Man Bass is the worst of the classic Mega Man games, and is legitimately a game that I hate. But also, it's not the game that I'd like to focus on today. No, instead we're looking at its sequel, a WonderSwan game that, from the few people I've talked to who've actually played it, seems to be regarded very, very poorly. And I find that odd, as I think there's actually some real fun to be had here. But first, just take a look at this cartridge itself. I mean, I know most people who play this game will just emulate it, but that may be easier said than done. As such, I've recorded gameplay from both an emulator and from myself just playing this game on my actual black and white WonderSwan console. And that means that yes, I've actually played and beaten this game on the real hardware. But yeah, the main reason I'm showing this off here is because I just really love how funky the WonderSwan carts look. That translucent plastic shell just screams 1999, while the fully exposed contacts make it look like it has an underbite. I should also mention that this is one of only 2 WonderSwan games that I own, with the other being Klonoa. Still, I'm glad I own Mega Man and Bass here, and it's actually the reason why I originally bought this console. I've always been a huge Mega Man fan, and back in high school when I found this system and game together on eBay for just under $10, I could not resist getting them. The real big quirk with this console is that games can be played in either landscape or portrait mode. Mega Man Bass 2 here actually takes advantage of that. One of the 8 stages involves you having to play the game in portrait mode, and while I think it's a great concept and this stage is definitely designed around it with its verticality, this stage is also marred by the WonderSwan being incredibly uncomfortable to play in this position. This, of course, isn't necessarily the fault of the game itself, but rather the fault of the WonderSwan being tiny and feeling like it was designed with child-sized hands in mind and not my big meat clobber hands. Within a few minutes of playing the stage, my hands started cramping, and I just had to take a break. Again though, that's not the fault of the game itself here, as I feel that is just a fault of the WonderSwan's design. But this whole stage flip thing also leads to some weirdness if you try emulating this game on a PC or through a PlayStation Classic or something. Every WonderSwan emulator I've ever tried doesn't have an option to rotate the screen to accommodate for playing in vertical mode. Thus, on my emulated runs, when I got to the stage while playing this game via my laptop, I ended up just remapping some controls and laying my laptop on its side. But that's only some of the weirdness here. We haven't even gotten to the story yet, and let me tell you, this is perhaps the strangest story in the entire Mega Man series. This game involves a group of 8 robots attacking a place called Symphony City, led by a mysterious leader who appears to be a clone of Mega Man and who claims to come from the future. He calls himself Mega Man Shadow. Well, I mean officially it's Rockman Shadow, or just R Shadow as Rockman is Mega Man's Japanese name, but you get the point. So, both Mega Man and Bass see this as a threat to humans living within Symphony City, so they go off to defeat 7 different Robot Masters, a ridiculously easy variant of the Yellow Devil, and R Shadow himself. Perhaps the oddest part of the story is that it's actually a direct sequel to another portable Mega Man game, that being Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy. And seeing as I covered that in literally the first retrospective that I ever recorded for this channel, I'm just going to go over that game briefly here. Also, side note, just look at how I looked back in 2016. I was so young, so full of life. So, Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy is completely different from the NES game. It plays well, even if Mega Man seems to be bigger than usual, and features 4 Robot Masters from Mega Man 2 and 4 from Mega Man 3. However, due to some programming weirdness, the soundtrack is all an octave higher than it should be, with some of the music literally being ear-splittingly difficult to listen to. And that's a shame too, as the actual compositions are all pretty good. Seriously, if you play this one, just mute it and listen to Rush Jet 1's cover soundtrack instead. I think it will definitely make you appreciate this title a bit more, because it definitely has some good ideas and decent gameplay, even if the execution is a bit iffy. But the reason that this game ties in with Mega Man and Bass 2 is because it features a new rival for Mega Man in the form of Quint. Yup, that guy right there riding a pogo stick. So why is he here? Well, Mega Man 1, 3, and 4 on the Game Boy all featured robots created by the evil Dr. Wily called the Mega Man Killers, who were built from the ground up to carry out their namesake. However, for Mega Man 2 on the Game Boy, Dr. Wily builds a time machine to travel 33 years or so into the future, sets a trap to capture Mega Man there, and then upon capturing him, reprograms him into Quint and comes back to the past to make them duke them out. Why Dr. Wily just doesn't stay in the future is beyond me, since, that point he'd accomplished his goal of beating Mega Man. Or, even better, why not just go back into the past and stop Mega Man from being created? Look, I know most will probably just write this off as being the result of a pointlessly convoluted and oddly edgy time travel plot, but I'd argue that this is just further proof that just because someone is book smart, that doesn't mean they're necessarily a logical person. I mean, just look at Dr. Wily, one of the greatest minds of his time, but he also created Springman. Anyways, back to Mega Man Bass 2, it turns out that R Shadow is actually Quint, except this time, he's operating completely independently from Dr. Wily. Like, seriously, Dr. Wily never shows up in this game. For unknown reasons that are literally never addressed, Quint has gained his own free will and gone potentially haywire, and that's what leads to him leading the rebellion in Symphony City. I guess since Quint's doing this with no human intervention, does that make him an actual precursor to Mega Man X? Like, wasn't being a robot with free will kind of X's big thing? If any one game really needed an adaptation while the Archie comics was still around, it was this one. Anyways, it's up to you as either Mega Man or Bass to go after Quint and save the day. So after you go through an intro stage in which you try to track Quint down to a base in the sewers and fight a weak Yellow Devil type boss, you get to choose from one of 4 bosses. Yep, only 4, with more unlocking afterwards on this grid type thing, just like in the original Mega Man and Bass. These 4 bosses are Dangan Man, Conroe Man, Kamuso Man, and Aircon Man. Yep, that's right, we have Air Conditioner Man here. I don't know if that's peak creativity or just proof of the devs lacking new ideas, but that name's just stupid and I love it. So after beating these initial stages, you unlock another stage, that being led by the Clockmen. That's right, you're fighting 2 Robot Masters at once in this stage, but honestly they're not that bad. Also, Proto Man shows up here for some reason, and then leaves like 5 seconds later. Thanks for the help, buddy. Speaking of things that seem cool but aren't really helpful, this game also features a shop system. This is based off of the one from the original Mega Man and Bass, and you can buy stuff here using bolts that you find scattered throughout each stage. But due to this game not being nearly as brutal as the original, and bolts seem to be more scarce as well, I never really found myself buying anything here. Some of these items cost hundreds of bolts, which is kind of funny seeing as I beat the game with fewer than 400 of the things on either of my playthroughs. It's a well-intentioned feature, but I've never bought a single thing here. So meanwhile, back at the plot, following the Clockman, we reach the stage of our final Robot Master, Compass Man. And let me be the first to say it, this guy has my favorite design out of all of the Robot Masters here. He puts up a really good fight too, only being damageable while he's split. He also shows up before you start the stage to, I don't know, I'm guessing he's just there to taunt you, and I think that's a nice touch. But as soon as he's down, you take his weapon, it's on to find Quint himself. You track him down to a remote location, lay a smackdown on him, and that's literally it. He doesn't really put up much of a fight either, and there's no Dr. Wily pulling the strings or anything here. You beat Quint and it's straight to the credits. Hell, this game doesn't even have a fortress or a boss rush. Quint really was leading this rebellion on his own, and that's kind of interesting once you think about it. There was no bigger bad here. Dr. Wily literally has no presence in this game. And apparently, Mega Man Base absolutely destroyed Quint. He is dead. He is never coming back. There's even a gravesite present in the credits. And that's really quite sad when you think about it. Perhaps the fight wasn't too difficult because Quint realized that if he killed Mega Man, then perhaps he himself would cease to exist, as he himself was that Mega Man who was fighting him at some point. I wonder how Mega Man, present day Mega Man, feels here. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Base probably took some comfort in this outcome. He finally defeated a Mega Man, even if it was just a reprogrammed future version of him. But what about present day Mega Man? Does anything change here for present day Mega Man? Or does he just have to go on living the rest of his robotic life knowing that one day he will become evil and he will be destroyed in part by his own hand? I guess it also raises a kind of ethical philosophical question. If an evil version of yourself comes from the future and causes havoc and you end up killing them, have you just committed murder or suicide? Let me know in the comment section below. Seriously though, I'm probably reading too far into this, especially as this game at its core is a simple 2D platformer where story is absolutely secondary to gameplay. But I guess this does answer one of the Mega Man series' biggest mysteries. I guess the outcome of this game is why classic Mega Man isn't around for the Mega Man X games. But the weirdness here is not limited only to the story. Graphically it's not terrible. It looks fine for a black and white WonderSwan game, and stuff looks mostly distinct enough that I can play it well enough on my real unit, but I can't help but think that the later Game Boy games looked a bit better. Take a look at Mega Man and Base themselves here. They both look somewhat off. Of course, enemies all look fine except for these little bell things that annoy me, and many bosses are well animated, but some of the jankiness extends to the actual boss as well. Just take a look at Compass Man here. That's the face of a man who just trusted the wrong fart. My biggest issue of any of these enemy designs really is that some of them are just kind of a pain to hit. I mean, as Mega Man anyways, Base can just kind of aim and shoot at them. But thankfully, those are mostly few and far between. And now, let's talk about the soundtrack. It's literally just a chiptune version of the soundtrack from the original Mega Man and Base. And don't get me wrong, these are great renditions of those tunes, but that doesn't change the fact that there are 0 original compositions in this game. I mean, and I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is odd. Still, it is quite enjoyable to listen to, with my favorite of these renditions being the theme from Conro Man Stage, which itself is a chiptune version of Ground Man's theme from the original Mega Man and Base. Here, take a listen. Perhaps the nicest change of pace from the original is how much more balanced this game feels. Well, I mean for Mega Man anyways. Yeah, I'd probably argue that this is more of a Mega Man game than a Base or a Mega Man and Base game. Both characters control the same as in the original, and there are certain optional goodies such as extra lives that only Base can get to, but the level designs have segments that make use of Mega Man's slide ability, and his charged Mega Buster just hits like a tank against bosses. Seriously, this thing is a beast of a weapon. It's so good that I actually hardly used any of the other special weapons that you get from the Robot Masters. Each stage also seems to take into account that Mega Man can't double jump like Bass can, and that's well appreciated. This also means that, while there are certain sections where Bass can use his abilities to take shortcuts and bypass obstacles, Mega Man is never blindsided by anything like he is in the original, except for a few occasions where I feel like I was thrown into a beginner's trap. The most egregious one of those was definitely an Aircon stage, where the screen is filled with these instant death spikes that you have to avoid while falling. Perhaps the biggest flaw here is in regards to the boss battles, as Bass anyways. On some of these encounters, his basic weapon does less than 1 unit of damage, meaning unless you've brought just the right special weapon, you're in for a slog of a fight. This goes for many bosses too, especially the Octopus and Aircon Man stage. In that sense, it feels like Bass is definitely the hard mode here, and if you go into this wanting to play as him only, I ask that you either rethink your decision or exercise a ton of patience for the first 2 or 3 levels. Actually, I think this is a good time to go into my other big issue of this game. Some levels are really creative and bring some cool ideas to the table, and others are incredibly generic, feeling Mega Man fare. A couple of them even seemed really eerily similar to one another, which is especially glaring seeing as there's only 8 stages. Also, can we just talk about how short that is even by Mega Man standards? Even the original Mega Man Bass had 12 stages. But despite those flaws, is Mega Man and Bass 2 a bad game? Absolutely not. Especially as Mega Man, I had a good bit of fun here. But also, its flaws are glaring enough that I can't call it a great Mega Man game either. If I was to rank it alongside the 5 Game Boy Mega Man games, I'd put it above Mega Man 2 and 3, but below 1, 4, and 5. And of course, I'd definitely put it above the original Mega Man and Bass. It's a completely middle-of-the-road Mega Man game that's definitely serviceable, and if you had a WonderSwan and a copy of this game back in the day, then I'm sure you have some fond memories with it. But let's be real, it mostly just stands out because of how weird it is. I don't think the average adult gamer would enjoy playing this on real hardware, especially with how cramped Aircon Man stage can get. And for most others, I also think dealing with screen flipping shenanigans might be a turnoff for those who just want to emulate it. But as someone who loves things that are weird and retro like this, and who is a massive Mega Man fan, I think my time with this title was well spent. But with that, that's it for today's look at Mega Man and Bass 2. I'd like to once again thank Zen Plus for sponsoring this video. You can check out the Marn Games Retro Game Shop through either the link in the description below or in the pinned comment. I also have another secondary link in the description that you can follow as well to see a curated list of Japanese Mega Man goodness. Remember, they ship worldwide, and if you sign up there now, you'll even get 300 yen to put towards your first purchase. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to some of my patrons on Patreon as well. That's Justin Chipman, Dylan Olaw, The Golden Bolt, and Robert and Abby Hornibrook. They're all great folks, and I can't thank them enough for helping out the channel. I'm really glad that I finally got to do this video, as I don't think the WonderSwan itself gets enough love. This video is actually part of an unofficial Mega Man retrospective of sorts that I started last year. It all began with that Trav guy and I talking about why Mega Man X6 is a terrible game that we love, and then we went on to my Super Adventure Rockman video, and now we're here. So I think to wrap this up, for now anyways, you should stay tuned for a video that I have in the works on the Mega Man trilogy for MS-DOS. So with that, thank you very much for watching, stay classy, and I'll see you next time.